In 1923, a German woman named Anna Schwartz needed a wheelbarrow, not to carry groceries, to carry money. She pushed 2 billion marks to the bakery to buy a single loaf of bread. While she stood in line, the price doubled. By the time she reached the counter, her money was worthless. The baker wanted 4 billion marks. This wasn't a natural disaster. This wasn't bad luck. This was deliberate government policy. And it's happening again, right now, to you. I'm going to show you something your government doesn't want you to know. Inflation isn't an accident. It's not caused by corporate greed or supply chains or pandemics. It's a tool, a mechanism, a wealth transfer device engineered by governments to pay their debts with your money. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how this theft works, why they'll never stop doing it, and what it means for your financial future. Here's what they teach you in school. Inflation happens when there's too much money chasing too few goods, supply and demand. Economics 101. True, but incomplete. Here's what they don't teach you. Where does that too much money come from? It doesn't appear magically. Someone creates it, and that someone is your government working through its central bank. Let me show you how the machinery works. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it creates what's called a deficit. In 2024, the United States federal government spent $1.8 trillion more than it collected. That's the deficit. Where did that money come from? The government borrows it by selling bonds. A bond is just an IOU. The government says, give us $1,000 today, we'll pay you back $1,000 plus interest in 10 years. Investors, pension funds, and foreign governments buy these bonds. But here's the trick. When investors lose confidence, when nobody wants to buy government debt anymore, the central bank steps in. The Federal Reserve in America, the European Central Bank in Europe, the Bank of England, they buy government bonds with newly created money. Money printed from nothing. This is called monetizing the debt. And when you print money to pay bills, you don't eliminate the debt. You transfer it. You transfer it from the government's balance sheet to every single person who holds your currency. Because when new money enters circulation, the existing money loses value. If there were $100 in existence yesterday and $200 today, each dollar is now worth half as much. Your purchasing power has been cut in half. You didn't lose money. You were robbed. And the thief was inflation. The government gets to pay its bills with freshly printed money that costs nothing to create. You get to watch your savings, your salary, your retirement account shrink in real terms. This is not a side effect. This is the point. Economists even have a name for it. They call it the inflation tax, because that's exactly what it is. A hidden tax that falls hardest on people who can't protect themselves. People with savings accounts, people on fixed incomes, people who get paid in dollars, not assets. This isn't theory. This is documented historical fact, repeated over and over in country after country for hundreds of years. Let me show you the pattern. Germany, 1923. After World War I, Germany owed massive reparations to the Allied powers. The government couldn't raise taxes without causing riots, so they printed money. Between 1921 and 1923, the German government increased the money supply by astronomical proportions. The Reichsbank bought government debt with newly created marks. By November 1923, inflation reached 2,500% per month. A single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. Workers demanded to be paid twice per day so they could spend their wages before they became worthless. Was this incompetence? No. Government documents reveal they knew exactly what they were doing. They were inflating away their war debts, paying back borrowed money with currency worth a fraction of what it had been. The people who lent money to Germany got destroyed. German citizens with savings got destroyed. But the government? The government's debt disappeared. Zimbabwe, 2008. Robert Mugabe's government needed cash. The economy was collapsing. Tax revenues had fallen. So they did what governments always do. They printed money. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe printed $21 trillion Zimbabwe dollars to pay debts to the International Monetary Fund. By November 2008, monthly inflation hit 79.6 billion%. The government issued $100 trillion notes. You could be a trillionaire and not afford a chicken. The currency became so worthless, they eventually abandoned it entirely and switched to US dollars. Was Mugabe stupid? No. His government understood perfectly well. Inflation let them pay their bills and fund their political allies, while the population watched their life savings evaporate. United States, 1971, to present. When Richard Nixon closed the gold window on August 15, 1971, he severed the last link between the dollar and anything real. No more gold backing. Pure fiat currency. Money backed by nothing but government promises. Nixon said it would stabilize the dollar. He promised it was temporary. He lied. Since 1971, the dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power. What cost $1 in 1971 costs $7.60 today. Your grandparents' money has been systematically devalued over 5 decades. The government's response? Print more. Since 2000, the money supply has increased by over 400%. Since 2020 alone, over $6 trillion created from nothing. To pay for stimulus checks, corporate bailouts, deficit spending, wars, and programs the government cannot afford with tax revenue. And who pays for this? You do. Every time prices rise, every time your paycheck buys less, every time your savings account loses value faster than the pathetic interest rate can compensate. This is not a bug in the system. This is the system working exactly as designed. Now, government economists will tell you inflation can be good. A little inflation, they say, stimulates the economy, encourages spending, prevents deflation. This is propaganda designed to make theft sound sophisticated. Let me translate what they're really saying. When your money loses value every year, you're incentivized to spend it quickly rather than save it. This keeps consumer spending high, which makes GDP numbers look good, which makes politicians look successful. Who benefits from high spending and low saving? Not you. You benefit from saving, from deferred gratification, from building wealth over time. The government benefits from you spending because spending is taxable and saving is not. Spending keeps the economy churning, which keeps tax revenues flowing. There's another reason they want inflation. It reduces the real value of government debt. Think about this carefully. The U.S. government owes $36 trillion. If inflation runs at 5% per year, the real value of the debt shrinks by 5% annually without the government paying back a single dollar. In inflation-adjusted terms, the debt gets smaller just by waiting. Research from the Wharton School shows that a permanent increase from 2% to 3% annual inflation reduces the real obligation of current federal debt by 7% over 3 decades. If inflation hits 5%, that number jumps to 19%. This is why governments never actually fight inflation with everything they have. They talk about controlling it. They raise interest rates just enough to look credible, but they never ever eliminate it, because inflation is how they pay their bills without raising taxes or cutting spending. In 1919, economist John Maynard Keynes wrote something profound. By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate secretly and unobserved an important part of the wealth of their citizens. Notice the words, secretly, unobserved, confiscate. This is what's happening to you right now. Now, the sophisticated response is to say, well, just invest in assets. Buy stocks, buy real estate, protect yourself from inflation. True. Asset owners do better in inflationary environments. If you own a house, the nominal value goes up with inflation. If you own stocks, companies can raise prices and revenues increase. But notice what this means. The game is rigged so that the only way to protect yourself is to already have assets. If you're wealthy enough to own property and stocks, inflation helps you. Your assets appreciate while your debts shrink. If you're not wealthy, if you're working class with minimal savings, if you're retired on a fixed pension, you get crushed. Your wages don't keep up with prices. Your savings account gets destroyed. Your purchasing power collapses. This is why wealth inequality has exploded since 1971. When Nixon untethered the dollar from gold, income and wealth concentration began accelerating. The timing is not coincidental. Inflation benefits asset holders and punishes wage earners. It systematically transfers wealth from the bottom to the top. And here's the cruel part. Governments know this. Central banks know this. They publish papers about it. The research exists in academic journals and policy documents. It's not hidden. It's just ignored by mainstream media and never taught in schools. So, where are we now? U.S. national debt, $36 trillion, 120% of GDP. Interest payments alone approaching $1 trillion annually, more than the defense budget. The government cannot pay this back through taxes, cannot cut spending enough to balance the budget. The political will doesn't exist. The math doesn't work. There are only 2 options. Default on the debt outright, which would trigger a global financial crisis and destroy U.S. credibility, or inflate it away gradually, which is what they're doing. Since 2020, we've seen the fastest monetary expansion in U.S. history. Trillions created to fund pandemic spending, infrastructure, bills, stimulus programs. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet exploded. The money supply surged. And now, inflation that officially hit 9% in 2022, though real inflation for food, energy, and housing is far higher for most families. Prices that have risen 20-30% in 3 years and show no signs of returning to previous levels. The Fed raised interest rates, and everyone celebrated when inflation dropped back to 3-4%. But notice what happened. Prices didn't go down, they just stopped rising as fast. The theft already occurred. Your purchasing power is gone and it's not coming back. This is the pattern. Rapid inflation when they need it. Slower inflation to appear responsible. But always inflation. Always transferring wealth from savers to debtors, from citizens to government, from your pocket to their budget. History shows this process doesn't last forever. Eventually, the inflation tax breaks the system. It happened in Weimar Germany. It happened in Zimbabwe. It happened in Argentina, in Hungary, in Venezuela. Always the same sequence. Excessive government spending, deficit financing, money printing, inflation, hyperinflation, currency collapse. The United States is not Zimbabwe. The dollar is the global reserve currency. The American economy is massive and productive. We have time, maybe decades. But the trajectory is clear. The debt keeps growing. The deficits persist. The money printing continues. And every time there's a crisis, economic downturn, political pressure, the response is the same. Print more money, monetize more debt, transfer more wealth through inflation. This is the silent robbery. And it will continue until one of two things happens. Either the government chooses fiscal discipline, cuts spending, balances budgets, and stops inflating, or the currency collapses under the weight of its own debasement. History suggests governments never choose option one voluntarily. They always push until the system breaks, until confidence evaporates, until nobody wants to hold the currency anymore and it spirals into hyperinflation. Maybe we avoid that fate. Maybe we're different. Maybe this time really is different. But the pattern says otherwise. And patterns that have held for centuries across dozens of countries don't break because we believe we're special. So what do you do with this information? First, understand what's happening. Inflation is not random. It's not corporate greed. It's not Putin or supply chains or pandemics. Those things affect prices in specific sectors. Sustained, economy-wide inflation comes from one place. Governments creating money to pay their bills. Second, recognize the timeline. This doesn't happen overnight. The collapse of Weimar Germany took years. The Soviet Union took decades. But when the acceleration phase hits, it happens fast. Zimbabwe went from manageable inflation to total collapse in months. Third, position yourself accordingly. Don't keep all your wealth in cash that's designed to lose value. Don't trust that pensions and Social Security will maintain their purchasing power. Don't assume the government will protect you when they're the ones doing the stealing. I'm not telling you to panic. I'm not telling you to buy gold and hide in a bunker. I'm telling you to understand the game being played with your money. The inflation tax is real. The wealth transfer is happening. And the people running the system know exactly what they're doing. They're counting on you not to notice. They're counting on you to believe the textbook explanations and the official statements and the reassurances that everything is under control. Anna Schwartz and millions like her didn't see it coming either. They believed their government. They trusted the system. They kept their savings in marks because that's what responsible people did. And they lost everything. Don't make the same mistake. If this video showed you something you didn't see before, share it. Because the one advantage you have is knowledge. Knowledge of how the system works. Knowledge of the historical pattern. Knowledge that protects you from being the victim when the next acceleration phase arrives. The silent robbery is in progress. Now you know who's stealing from you, how they're doing it, and why they'll never stop until forced to. What you do with that knowledge is up to you.